There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
Hey, it's the 8 o'clock hour, and it's, what is it, July 26th, and I'm sitting here in my green screen dungeon in New Jersey. Welcome all. I see some familiar faces. Thanks for popping in. And tonight is a very, very exciting night because, as you know, I'm a huge fan of many things, including comedy, magic, ventriloquism, the Twilight Zones, 70s, 60s, 70 cool things. James Bond, artwork, cartoons, and this man does it all. I've been watching this guy for a very, very long time, and I'm so delighted to have him here today. So let me tell you about the guest that's coming up. And I know after you see and speak and hear from him, you're going to clearly want to get involved and getting some of his materials, which are really wonderful. The guest coming up is Arlen Schumer, and he's an award-winning comic book style illustrator for advertising, editorial markets, and a member of the Society of Illustrators, an author, designer of a coffee book art tables, including one that I have here, Visions from the Twilight Zone, and the Silver Age of comic book art, which we're going to show you in a little while. He's won an Independent Book Publishers Award for this, for Best Popular Culture Book, and Arlen is also recognized an expert in American popular culture, especially the legendary television series, The Twilight Zone, and music of Bruce Springsteen, presenting his own visual lectures on these and other subjects at universities and cultural institutions across the country and around the world. And it is a total delight for me to bring him on here. Please welcome the funny, high-energy, interactive, multi-talented man, Mr. Art Schumer.
Mr. Art Schumer.
Okay, you have to unmute yourself, Mr. Art.
What? How am I?
There you go, Mr. Arlen Schumer. How are you?
Do you not hear me?
Oh, you're good now. I hear you now.
Okay, you just.
Oh, I hear you.
You don't hear me?
Arlen. I'm going to call you Artie now because you're my best friend.
I hate every name that's associated with Arlen.
Okay.
I hate Alan. I hate Harlan.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And you just introduced me as Art Schumer. You realize?
Should I call Arlen? I meant Arlen. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you. I just want to make sure we have a good connection here. You for a minute there, you seemed like a little off on the mouthing.
Okay. I haven't done anything since we had our sound check.
You're good. We're good. Okay. Great. Once again,
can we like start over again?
Let's do it all over again. Once again, it's the great
worst beginning ever.
Arlen Schumer. Arlen Schumer, ladies and gentlemen. Arlen Schumer. And here he is.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
No, thank you. Hey, I've been following your stuff for so many years, and I don't know if people realize how multi-skilled and talented that you may be. So I don't know where you even want to begin. So.
I'm the Rodney Dangerfield of American pop culture. I've gotten no respect.
You have a lot of respect.
I never assume people know about my work. I'm constantly, I'm always like, I try to be humble and be surprised that somebody's aware of my stuff. Especially in the age of social media where you promote events and you think people on your so-called friends list know about them. And then when they don't show up and you ask them, where were you? They go, where was I? What event? So it's like, I have no way of knowing if my stuff is reaching people. I know it does reach some people and I'm grateful for them, but I never assume that. And I guarantee you the people listening to your show tonight, I bet you it's probably 50-50 people that know of me and people that don't.
Well, I hope that we reach many more people. We find that a lot of people watch it live, and then we get a lot more people watching much later on YouTube.
On the internet, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way it always goes. Now, Arlen, I don't know if, tonight I'd like to speak a lot about the Twilight Zone. And by the way, you're not an aficionado. You're like an encyclopedia of a lot of things, and this is one of them. And I don't know as well if people realize that you are such a great comic book artist as well. So we're going to bring
actually not a comic book artist. Illustrator. I'm an illustrator who works in a comic book style.
Yes.
Because when people, especially laymen, have seen my stuff, my artwork, my illustration, they think I've done comics from Marvel and DC. Mm-hmm. I've never worked for Marvel and DC. I'm an historian of basically their works as an independent historian. But I'm an illustrator working in a comic book style. I didn't get into the Society of Illustrators because I was a comic book artist. I was doing illustration in comic book style. For decades, Society of Illustrators didn't acknowledge comic art as illustration because this is getting off on a tangent already.
Sure, it's okay though.
But they were looking up to painting to be accepted as fine art. And anything with a black outline around it was rejected. But
wow.
Society of Illustrators merged with the Museum of Comics and Cartoon Art about 12 years ago. And now, comics rule the roost at Society of Illustrators. So once again, with pretty much everything in my career, I was ahead of my time. I've been trying comics or art. I mean, I got Print Magazine, the trade magazine, the graphic design field, to commit a special issue to comics in 1988. That was my first published article. And listen, when you actually lay out my career in all the different things I've done, Twilight Zone, Bruce Springsteen, comic book history, I'm doing a James Bond webinar. I've lectured on the Fleischer Superman cartoons.
Wow.
These are all the things I loved as a kid that made me become an artist, that made me be who I am. My very first visual image on television as a child is the black and white Twilight Zone eyeball in outer space.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. And my very first cinematic image was my mother, may she rest in peace, took my brother Steve and I, a year and a half older than me, to see Dr. No, the first Connery Bond movie, at a drive-in Paramus, New Jersey, the land of malls.
A drive-in.
First cinematic image. And you ready for this, John?
Yes.
My mother was a widow. My father died when I was 4 months old. She raised my brother and I herself. I don't have a father. So imagine my first cinematic image, I'm 4.5 years old, is seeing Sean Connery as in Dr. No on a drive-in theater screen larger than life. Right. And I don't have a father. And so all of my pop culture surrogate fathers, like the superheroes, I mean, the first comic book image I can recall, again, 5 years old, was that Superman annual cover from 1963 where he's rendered to look like a silver statue.
Right.
Kurt Swan penciled the baby boomer Superman artist, but it was washed home by Jack Adler. Now, we didn't know this when we were kids. We found this out years later. But Jack Adler, the head color at DC's coloring department, is Howard Stern's cousin or uncle.
Get out of here. I didn't know that.
And that's why Howard was such a big fan, because Jack Adler used to drop off all the new DC comics to Howard when he was a kid.
It's hilarious. That's great. That's wild. I didn't know that.
I can find a way of connecting all of my pop culture loves. Take Bruce Springsteen. Remember I told you I just did a webinar on the Max Fleischer Superman cartoons.
Yes.
A couple years ago, while I was working on a book about the Fleischer cartoons, I'll tell you about that later, but he does a documentary just for the BBC, and he's strumming his acoustic guitar and talking about his childhood. And he goes, yeah, I used to stay up real late at night, and right before the test pattern would come on, they would show this really cool Superman cartoon.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
And I remember being a little kid. Bruce is 9 years older than me. And I remember those Superman cartoons aired at weird times of the day.
Yeah.
I'd come home from lunch, and they used to be on TV, and they were dark. I had a black and white TV at Zenith.
Wow.
19-inch. And, you know, they looked like, I didn't know at the time, they were like film noir cartoons. But I was a kid, but I knew they looked different and better and richer than the Saturday morning shit we were used to.
Right. But Arlen, you have to admit, things have changed so much dramatically today. I mean, considering just the environment now when it comes to like everything is superhero movies.
When we were 10, when I was 10 years old, me and my brother and whoever we knew that liked comics was basically me and my brother. We would have, because that was what comic book fandom was. Everybody was isolated.
Sure.
If it wasn't for the letter columns, comic book fandom and comic conventions never would have happened. It all comes from those letter columns.
Yeah.
So we knew that if Hollywood took superheroes seriously and didn't just make fun of them, like the Batman TV show, which we hated, by the way.
Right.
And, you know, as an adult, I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with it. But as a kid, I was a fan of the Batman comics, especially what was called the New Look a couple of years before the TV show with the great DC artist Carmine Infantino.
Yeah.
Who I'll be doing a webinar of in early August.
Wow.
That's a whole other story. But the point is if you were a fan of the Infantino New Look Batman and you got the pot-bellied Adam West with the tiny ears and the open eye holes, cross-eyed look. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Robin actually looked like the Infantino Robin come to life. But you look at the Infantino Batman, that's not the Batman we got. But I digress.
I understand.
You know what I'm saying?
I get it.
Where were we?
But no, you know something, it's interesting you bring this up because as a kid, I too share this with you. I mean, as I was a huge Spider-Man fan, I would all the comic, I had every Spider-Man comic book, and I would get trace paper from the 5 and dime that it was called. It was really a 5 and dime at those times. And I'd rip it off and I'd lay it over it and put a piece of tape on it with a pencil, and I would draw the whole thing because I was never really good at drawing.
A whole generation drew because of comics.
Yeah.
I started drawing because of a children's black and white. Well, again, my TV set was black and white, but I think it was shot in black and white in those days. Color didn't really happen until the Batman TV show in '66. Everything before that on TV was black and white. But there was a children's show called Diver Dan about a deep sea diver that you can't see his face, and they never revealed who he was. So he was like a superhero, but he would walk slowly like as if he were underwater, and they would have fish hanging on thin wires. And it was this adventure thing called Diver Dan. And my brother started drawing Diver Dan because, again, the mask, it looked like he had a mask on. And I started drawing because my brothers, when your older brother starts doing something, you do it.
Sure. You're both artistic.
How it started. So, you know, we would stare at those Gil Kane comics, Green Lantern, Adam. We would discuss who's a better inker for Jack Kirby, Joe Senator, Vince Coletta. You know, this is how we grew up. But my point is, we knew if Hollywood took superheroes seriously, they would be great films. It only took 40 years for the generation Hollywood like to die off that thought comics could only be trash. Listen, William Dozier, the producer of Batman, he thought comics were trash. The only way he knew to do them was to camp them up. He couldn't take them, quote, seriously. Michael Uslan, the producer of all the Batman films, it took him 10 years from when he bought the rights in '79 to the first film And it wouldn't have happened without the Dark Knight.
And look at today.
All those years before the Dark Knight, the minute Michael Uslan would bring up, hey, I got the rights to do Batman, Hollywood, they would go, that the stink of that TV show lasted for 20 plus years. And like I said, Frank Miller was influenced by Neil Adams' Batman. Neil Adams was one of the gods of comic book art in the late 60s, early 70s. I'm of that generation. That it was Neil Adams and Jim Steranko, and I ended up working for Neil Adams, my childhood idol. I almost worked for Jim Steranko, and I've been on my own, ever since. But yeah, I mean, we all grew up because of those comics, Drew, and our imaginations were kindled, just like Twilight Zone kindled the imaginations of the Stephen Kings and the David Lynch's and the Steven Spielbergs. And the J.J. Abrams and the Jim Camerons, the Stephen Kings, the creators of our modern fantasy science fiction worlds were all kindled like spark plugs by the Twilight Zone. You see how I seamlessly went somehow?
Yeah, you brought it all back full circle.
Because again, they're all related.
Somebody made a comment. The 40s Batman was worse than Adam West.
Bruce Springsteen has a song. What is it? I'm a Rocker. And it starts off, I got a 007 watch. It's a one and only. I got a, sci-fi beeper that tells you when I'm lonely. I got a Batmobile. Bruce comes out of the same pop culture bouillabaisse.
Absolutely.
That we all come out of, especially I'm a fellow New Jerseyite. So we all grew up with the New York media, the Little Rascals,
loved it.
All the black and white Universal monster movies, all that stuff. Three Stooges. We all come out of that. The Superman George Reeves show.
Love it. I told on the air a couple of weeks ago the story too. Do you remember the particular Superman with George Reeves where he was stuck inside of a square hole in the floor with Jimmy Olsen, and he told him he had to believe anything in order to get out? Do you remember
my favorite episode, John?
Get out of here.
That's the Kryptonite beam. I forget what it's called. It has an odd title, but it's the one where Superman is tricked into going to the bottom of a well that the bad guys built, and they have a Kryptonite ray gun
right
at the top of the thing, and they shoot the green beams down, and Superman can't fly out. He's on the ground. Somehow Lois and Jimmy show up, and I guess they somehow get in the pit with them, or the bad guys put them in. But here's what Superman does. And I think in the beginning of the episode, there was some magician, the way they set it up, showing them this trick where you can levitate somebody.
That's correct.
George Reeves laying there like Christ off the cross, slumped on the floor.
That's correct. That's right.
With that look that you never used to seeing George Reeves Superman in. And he's talking very slowly and quietly to Jimmy. He goes, Lois. Because I think he first gets Lois to levitate. And the special effects for late 50s TV weren't bad. He basically, I forget what he does to make her levitate, but all of a sudden, Lois is standing there erect, and then they make her just tilt.
Sideways,
and because the walls were closing in.
Right.
So an eggshell, by putting Lois up, it stopped the walls from closing in.
Right. And they used that as a ladder to get out.
But then he got Jimmy somehow to get on, and I think Sean Connery used this in Goldfinger when he was jailed in solitary, and he fools the guard into coming into the cell, and he goes up on his hands and feet, sideways, whatever you call that in military lingo.
Yeah.
You rappel up the wall, when you levitate. The point is it was a pretty trippy episode for late 50s Superman.
It was one of my favorites. But
and it's my favorite episode because it showed Superman in a weakened state, just like those Kurt Swan stories that followed in the 60s. Whenever Weisinger would do a Death of Superman story, everybody loved it. Somehow it was either an imaginary story or they explained it away somehow. The point is he had a handful of Death of Superman stories that everybody remembers because we love to see our hero,
come back
above death.
Yes, but the problem with this particular episode was, if you remember, he kept telling Jimmy Olsen. By the way, I didn't mean to get into this, but he kept telling Jimmy Olsen.
You started it.
I know I started. It's my fault. And he told them both. He said, "You have to believe. If you believe in it, you can make it happen. You can make anything happen if you really use your mind to believe." So I watched this as a 4 or 5-year-old kid upstairs in Brooklyn at an apartment. And I believed. I said, "Well, if I really believe I could do, I want to fly like Superman."
Twilight Zone episode, Bowley, you got to believe. You got to believe, Bowley.
That's the truth. I believe. And I jumped out the window. Arlen, I jumped out the window, and I crashed into a radiator and cracked my head at 4 because I actually believed I could fly.
You're what every parents group warned against. Comics are bad because kids will imitate. Did you really do that?
Swear to God, I remember seeing stars, and then I remember being woken up.
You gave the rest of us a bad name.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
You actually did it. You gave proof. I always thought that was an urban legend, but you actually did it.
That's why I called you Arthur instead of Arlen.
Let me ask you something.
I got cracked on the head.
You remember? I'm just curious, and it's a morbid curiosity.
Sure.
But do you remember the moment that you jumped, that you realized, holy shit, I made
No, I didn't. I believed. I 100% believed that.
You what? Until you hit bottom?
There was a big, the old radiators in New York, the big.
Yeah. So what happened when you hit?
I saw stars.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I woke up. I was downstairs with my mother holding my head and bleeding, crying.
Did you then realize what the hell you did?
Well, later on, yes. Now I believe I can talk to you.
Oh my God.
Anyway, I don't want to get into it. I just thought it was. I thought it would be interesting. It's just a weird thing. Hey, somebody asked Arlen, did you ever meet Rod Serling?
No, I wish I did. I'm lucky to say that I mentioned I worked for one of my childhood idols, Neil Adams. I almost worked for the other one, Jim Steranko. They were like the Beatles, Rolling Stones of comic book art, at that late 60s, early 70s era. Right. And I got to meet Bruce Springsteen and look him right in the eye and say, your music means more to me than anything else in the world.
So cool.
20 years old, and he gave me like a brotherly hug in response.
Oh, that's so cool.
The one guy I wish I'd met, because I feel like when I kid, I'm the son Rod Serling never had. He does have 2 adult daughters that are in their mid-60s or so. Yes. I could have been his son had he had a son. But the work I've done on the Twilight Zone, my coffee table book, which is the only coffee table book about the Twilight Zone that exists. It's out of print, but you can find it on Amazon. They're linked to all the secondhand book sites. But the point is the lectures, the articles, the essays, all the works I've done on the Twilight Zone, I imagine are what a son would do to honor his father.
I agree.
So when I say I'm the son Rod Serling never had, I'm merely saying, look at my works, ye mortals, and don't despair. You will find love and truth and beauty in all of that Twilight Zone stuff.
I absolutely
biblical in its wisdom.
I've also heard you say in the past that you believe that any of the modern day sci-fis or any other of these shows today could all be traced back to these original.
In less than 6 degrees of Serling, as I call it.
Yeah. You want to tell us about that? I mean, that's fascinating to me. First of all, like today, like I would think the thing that most popular that seems reminiscent of it is Black Mirror, which I do like Black Mirror.
Black Mirror is the best new version of the Twilight Zone. Yeah. It doesn't, of course, overly say that. It's basically the guy that created it and creates most of the episodes, Charlie Brooker.
Yep. Charlie Brooker. Yes.
I mean, he is a true child of Serling, as the guys I mentioned before are, meaning he's internalized the Twilight Zone. And instead of all the crappy remakes of the Twilight Zone that have been done, including the most current one, which I got problems with, but Black Mirror is the only one that succeeds because he's paying homage to the Twilight Zone without being heavy-handed about it, without being overt about it. And the episodes have a sensibility because he chose a theme, technology run amok, that gives the series an umbrella feeling like you felt about the original Rod Serling Twilight Zone.
Yes.
He didn't write or direct any, he didn't direct any episodes, but he didn't write them all. He was the auteur of the Twilight Zone because I have a thing that I call the 5 themes of the Twilight Zone.
Okay. Lectures
and articles that I've developed around that basically say that even though there were other great writers like Richard Matheson,
Yes.
famous science fiction writer, Charles Beaumont. These are legends. But, they wrote under Serling's umbrella or tourist theme, which was the Twilight Zone itself, the middle ground between light and shadow, the dimension of imagination. It was Serling giving a platform for people like Matheson and Beaumont and George Clayton Johnson, another famous writer. But listen, Serling wrote the best episodes. He wrote some of the worst episodes too. I mean, when you churn anything out on a weekly schedule, like the Twilight Zone had to be churned out, you're going to get your share of duds. So I'm very critical when it comes to the Twilight Zone. As a matter of fact, I think, based on what I see on social media, I consider half of its 156 episodes, John, dogs.
Really?
And then there's 75 episodes. I think 50 of those are what I would call good to great television. And there's a lot of ground there, obviously.
Yeah.
That leaves 25 half hours that I would give to the aliens if they beamed down in front of me and said, we have room in our spaceship for one example of Earth television. What are you going to give him, John? Are you going to give him the
which one? What are you going to give him?
Are you going to give him Seinfeld? Are you going to give him I Love Lucy? Are you going to give him Breaking Bad? What are you going to give the aliens? You know what I'm giving them?
The Twilight Zone.
Those 25 episodes. And again, Serling wrote a bunch of them. There's some Matheson, there's some Beaumont, but the point is it was Serling's overall creative vision.
He's fascinating. I watched an interview. I watched a couple interviews today of him, and you probably know exactly which ones I watched. And
there's only a handful that exists.
Yeah, and it was really, he's brilliant. You could see how brilliant the man was. You could see how defined he is about his thinking. And when the thing I think that I didn't realize years ago when I was younger that I understand now is the Twilight Zone really dealt with topics about social criticisms of the time, even though he claimed that wasn't what his agenda was, which I think it really was. It was fantasy, science fiction.
I don't know if you have that actually accurate.
Okay, please.
He wanted to do themes of social justice. He was the original social justice warrior, the angry young man of television.
That's what they called him.
Yeah. As a television playwright during the 50s with these 90-minute live things.
Yes.
Where he won Emmys, Requiem for Heavyweight, Patterns, which was about corporate, goings on, all ahead of its time. But the point is the censors controlled television like nobody's business. The shows themselves were creatively helmed by non-creative people. And Serling had to fight to get anything on television that had any kind of social theme. He wanted to do one of his 90 minutes on the death of Emmett Till. In 1955, Emmett Till's death is what caused Rosa Parks to not give up her seat. She thought of Emmett Till.
Mm-hmm.
We're still living with Emmett Till's with Black Lives Matters.
That's the point. Nothing has really changed.
The censors made him change it from a black kid getting lynched in Mississippi to a Spanish American, something happening in Mexico. In other words, it denuded and defanged. So he was fed up with it. At the same time, he's winning Emmys for Hollywood, for The Machine. And how did they reward him? They give him his own show. He's the first creative person to own his own show. We think of shows now, ever since David Chase and Matthew Weiner, creative people, in a sense, own their shows. They're the showrunners, so to speak. Serling was the first to cast a black man on television in a serious dramatic role. Yes. The Bully episode, you got to believe, was about a black boxer, Ivan Dixon, who ends up being the black guy on Hogan's Heroes.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he cast him as a boxer. Serling was a boxer when he was in the war in the Philippines. He was bantamweight. He's a tiny guy.
I didn't know he was a boxer. I do understand.
But he's paratrooper. So think about all these things he's combining in the Twilight Zone episode. Casting a black guy in a serious dramatic role, making it about a boxer. He's the guy that wrote Requiem for Heavyweight and was a boxer. So it's from his own experience. And by casting a black man in 1960, 6 months before a guy named Cassius Clay wins the gold medal at the Rome Summer Olympics in the summer of 60, this episode aired 6 months before. So Serling is casting a black boxer on the national stage, a black dramatic actor on primetime television.
Yeah, he was way ahead of his time.
Gave parts to women in serious dramatic roles, not just screwball comedians or housewives. They were independent women. I mean, Midnight Sun is about a woman artist living in New York City alone. This is in the early 60s, when this is so far before Betty Friedan and women's lib and everything. Because Serling had 2 daughters, he was sympathetic. He took women seriously. He treated women with respect. He was a mensch, nice Jewish boy, Rod Serling.
Yes, he was born New York, Jewish man in New York City, right?
He was born in Syracuse, but raised in Binghamton, so he considers Binghamton his hometown. I was born in Detroit, but moved 4 months later and grew up in New Jersey. So
lucky for you.
I'm from Detroit, but I consider myself, New Jersey's my home state.
And he lived in Connecticut also. Didn't he live in Connecticut and travel back and forth?
Yes, in Westport, where I'm living now. Don't get me started on that subject.
You wish you were his son.
The world I never made. Like Howard the Duck.
Now, where do you think Serling? So, I mean, you kind of explained it in a sense. So, where do you think Serling drew his inspiration from? Because is it from?
There's a graphic novel about Serling out right now for the past year or so by a friend of mine, Corin Shadme. He's a graphic novelist, illustrator, teaches at the School of Visual Arts. His graphic novel about Serling is called Twilight Man. And it's a biographic novel about Serling coming of age. And it goes heavily into his war experiences in the Philippines as a paratrooper in World War II, where he witnessed, like that whole generation did, death in front of his eyes, which is why that generation, most of whom came home and didn't talk about it. It was PTSD before they knew it was PTSD. We're only finding out recently that the famous J.D. Salinger of Catcher in a Rye suffered from what they used to call shell shock, but we now know is PTSD. Right. And how much of that informed what he ended up writing. Well, Serling was one of them. The ones who did not talk about it, they became artists and writers. Norman Mailer, a whole generation of American men that came back from the war and saw death. I mean, one of Serling's buddies in the army was decapitated in front of his eyes when a supply crate from their own forces dropped right on top of him, right in front of him. And I'm sure every veteran has stories like that. Not that Serling was unique, but Serling had PTSD that we didn't know about. He had recurring nightmares. His kids describe him getting up in the middle of the night saying, the enemy's coming for me or whatever. That poor generation of 20-somethings, or some of them were 19, whatever they were, to throw them into war. I mean, I can't even imagine. I was a kid when the Vietnam War was going on, but even then I knew it was bad. There was no shame in being a draft dodger back then. The fact that the Republican Party has succeeded in casting, draft dodger, like the one thing I defend Trump on, believe it or not, is the fact that I knew when I was 12 years old that the Vietnam War was wrong. And had I been old enough to have been drafted, I would have been to Canada toot sweet.
Right.
There was no honor going to Vietnam. The Republican Party, don't get me started on them.
Right.
But they succeeded in recasting the Vietnam War as some noble effort. If only we were allowed to win the war. That bullshit. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
I believe so. I think, when I think back about these times, I don't think a lot of things have not changed though, because when you do these comparisons of the Twilight Zone then to the today's general consensus of people's behavior, nothing has really changed. The only thing has changed is technology has gotten better to promote the.
There's nothing new under the sun.
No.
I just watched for the upteenth time last night. TCM had on 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Love it.
Which I consider the greatest movie ever made, along with Citizen Kane, maybe the greatest black and white, and 2001 greatest color film. Those are the 2 movies I would give to the aliens, along with those Twilight Zone episodes. And I would say these 2 films will tell you everything you need to know about mankind. But what blew me away, like any great work of art, no matter how many times you've seen it or experienced it, you pick out something new that you didn't really notice before. But, when you mention things haven't changed, what is 2001 about? People have been debating this for 52 years since it came out. But what it's essentially about is that, the ape sequence is about man learning to kill, to advance himself and to survive. And then what is the outer space sequence all about? It's about Hal fearing for his life, like as if he were human, and killing the crew in order to survive.
You know, I never saw it from that perspective.
Hello, you've never talked to me before.
No, but that's really fascinating.
When you take the famous jump cut in movie history of the bone becoming the spaceship,
okay,
that is the visual theme of 2001. How far has man progressed where Hal would murder an entire crew because he thought, artificial intelligence, that his survival was at stake? He killed to live. He murdered to live. After Adam and Eve, what did Cain and Abel do?
Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one can say philosophically, how far have we come? This whole Black Lives Matters thing and George Floyd, I mean, it's all the same things. What's really changed? I just saw a civil rights special about the Freedom Summer of '64. And it's like, here we are, and there's Nazis marching on the streets, just like they were in 1964. And it's like, what's really changed? So thank you for depressing us, Hannah.
No, I'm not. I'm actually fascinated. There's a couple of things you said that
I'm kidding.
No, but there's a couple of things I haven't actually thought about that. Now, when I go watch 2001 again, I'll be putting that in my head.
I just got started with 2001. I just wanted to bring out to you the fact that is the essential theme of 2001.
Right.
Is that on the one hand, you have man developing into a star child, but on the other hand, you've got man still murdering at the same time. So man has both evolved, and yet the more things change, the more they stay the same.
I don't know if people know this about Arlen. However, Arlen is a great artist, and I'm going to bring up some of his artwork in a minute. But let me just circle right back.
That's what I call a smooth segue, John.
Oh, I'm smooth. I'm so smooth.
Don't quit your day job and become a radio DJ with those smooth segues. You better talk about James Bond in my upcoming webinar, which I'm trying to sell tickets to.
I'm actually going to. I'm
running out of time.
I'm giving you one of these. I want to swing back into this because I don't want to get too far off of this, but I do want to talk about your James Bond. I do want to talk about also your wonderful table book as well. But actually, let's bring up the James Bond now before we get into more of the Twilight Zone. This is the actual webinar that's happening. Yeah. There it is. Sean Connery, Bond Canon, first 4 films, a new webinar by pop culture historian Arlen Schumer. And I know this is taking place. I'd like to show everybody, I'll give them tell them where to get this. Why don't you tell us, what is this webinar going to be about? And I could tell them where to get it. It's at the New York Adventure Club.
Okay, so this is an organization out of New York City that used to do live in-person meetups and walking tours. But of course, the pandemic shut it all down overnight. So the guy that runs it, Corey Schneider, smart guy, he shifted to webinars literally overnight in late March. And he was talking to some people in Manhattan that he knew because he needed people that were not only experts on things, but they had to also be visual, because when you do a webinar, people got to be looking at something on the screen. So a friend of mine who's one of the foremost experts on Frank Sinatra named Will Friedwald, he's written like 10 books on Sinatra. And, he's on Facebook and Instagram and all the major social media, Will Friedwald. But he must have been talking to Corey Schneider about doing a Frank Sinatra webinar. And Corey asked him, who else do you know is very visual and an expert in things? And the minute Will heard visual, he goes, you should give Arlen Schumer a call. So, I've been doing what I call visual lectures for decades, where I spend a lot of time projecting my images and dissolving and really giving you a visual show, in addition to my verbal, quote, diarrhea, so to speak. But transferring those live things to webinars, you're just taking your Keynote file. I don't work in PowerPoint, sure. And you're just making a PDF and you're showing the PDF. So, that's what I do live. So my silver lining in this pandemic has been being able to work with Corey Schneider at New York Adventure Club and do all these webinars that are basically either brand new, like the Bond webinar coming up. I've been a James Bond fan. My first cinematic image, I told you, was Connery and Dr. No, and I don't have a father. So it's like, come back, Shane. You know, it's like he was my father figure, Connery. So I decided I needed to come up with subjects if I want to keep a regular gig at New York Adventure Club. I'm trying to do something every Wednesday or Wednesday night. And I'm booked up until mid-October at this point.
That's a beautiful thing. I want to show people this is what it is right here. This is what you'll be seeing. This is
right. As long as you go to nyadventureclub.com, you'll see their smorgasbord of servings, but you'll recognize my graphics, you know,
right
like
there.
Bond graphic. Yeah. But I like the one you showed before. That's really the true graphic that he could only use a piece of for his page. That's the New York Adventure Club.
There's 49 tickets left, I understand, and they're $10 each. Now, one of the things now, I'm working next Wednesday night.
Your money back if not satisfied.
It's money back guarantee. But more importantly about this, you say even if you're not available at 8 o'clock on Wednesday, which I am not, you could watch it later on.
Here's the thing. Most people think webinars, because they're live, that if they can't see them live, they don't even bother, especially if you have to buy a ticket. So, you know, what I try to impress in all of my social media posts is, you know, when you buy a ticket, it allows you to watch. If you can't make it live, it's okay, because it's being recorded so that you'll be able to watch for up to a week at your convenience. That's great. Buying a ticket allows you access for a whole week to watch it at your leisure. So I can't, you know, you can't insist that enough and put that in people's heads, because when you go to New York Adventure Club, it's not the first thing you notice. So people just think, oh, if I can't make it, I'm not going to buy a ticket. So definitely buy a ticket. And I guarantee you, like I said, double your money back. I guarantee you I'll blow your mind. You could be a Bond aficionado. I'll still show you the stuff you know in a fresh new way. It's like a live 3-hour documentary in real time.
I would love it. I'm buying it. I'm gonna watch it after, because I'm working that night. Speaking of which, I met Sean Connery. I was doing a gig on New Year's Eve.
When?
And let's see, probably 3 New Year's Eve ago, about 3 years ago, it was on New Year's Eve.
Wow.
It was in the Bahamas.
What?
And maybe it was 4 years, maybe 4 years ago.
You. New Year's Eve, you're in the Bahamas?
Well, one night I performed for a very wealthy client that
owned the high life, buddy.
Well,
you're living the dream. You're in the Bahamas on New Year's Eve?
Well, for one night. I'm working. I'm not partying.
Are you being paid?
Very well.
What?
Extremely well.
You realize
that's the point. The point is,
you realize complaining, that's a sin against God. You know?
Who's complaining? I love what I do. I love jokes. I love jokes.
Only one night. You got a paid gig in the Bahamas and you met Sean Connery.
It was cool. And he lived next door to my client.
I barely know you, John, and you're
Arlen.
Cynic. You're a jaded cynic. You're far too young to be so jaded and cynical. Spare me those sound effects.
Well, anyway, I met him. He was very nice. He lived next door to this gentleman I was doing the party for, and they play golf every day together. Now, that's all over. So anyway, so I'm going to check that out myself. And also, while I got you here, let me go swing back again let's go back into Twilight Zone, because I want to tell them about your book too. Let's do that now. All right, great. Let's do your segue. You ready? There it is. The Silver Age of Comic Book Art, and it's a revised edition by Arlen Schumer. Now, this book is a tabletop book. Tell us about this.
First of all, you keep getting the phrase wrong. You said coffee art table books. It's a coffee table art book.
I'm dyslexic.
Yeah, are you really?
No, I'm not. I'm just silly.
Don't joke about that.
No, I'm silly. Actually, I joke about everything.
Yeah, but you can't joke about being dyslexic.
You can joke about anything. Nothing's okay.
No.
Hit me. I'm okay.
Okay. You know, if it's plausible, like telling me you're dyslexic, it can't be true. Therefore, it's not a joke.
If it makes you feel better.
Well, I'm just telling you the laws of comedy. If it's plausible, it's not a practical joke.
See, yeah, well, to me, everything's funny.
You only get one over on somebody if it's not plausible.
By
the way, just remember, I'll bust your balls any day of the week, John. I'm from Jersey, baby, and I'm from North Jersey.
I like you.
Before. There's a Mason-Dixon line in Jersey. It's like the Meadowlands. So people look down upon you.
Me and you're going to have an arm wrestle one day. We're going to have a beer and an arm wrestle.
Yeah, but I still accept you as my brother from Jersey. Okay,
I do too, Arlen. I really do.
I love you.
So tell me about this book then. So it's right here.
So my book is the only book of its kind because it's an oversized coffee table book about the great art of the Silver Age, which is an era that is so influential. I mean, every Hollywood movie and TV show is based on characters that came out of the Silver Age, which is roughly 56 to 70. It's kind of the 60s, and it was called the Silver Age because the Golden Age became known as the early years of comics, the 1940s, when the superheroes started. So that's what separates gold and silver. But I was a child of the Silver Age, like a whole generation was. And yet mostly every book about comic book history, even by the great Jim Steranko, was about the Golden Age. So I grew up with like, where is the book about the Silver Age? Well, you know what they say, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. So I had the idea when I was at Rhode Island School of Design that my degree project should be, I wasn't thinking of a book, but I was thinking like of some massive exhibit. But the theme would be comic book art in the 1960s. Well, it only took about 25 years, but I finally got that published as a coffee table book. It was a lecture 10 years earlier. It's a whole, like every creative success, it's like a maze of how you got there. But suffice it to say, I got my thesis published finally. And then I did a revised edition back in 2014 because the first edition, I had to rush out for the publisher at the time. I was only happy with half the typography, and I'm a graphic designer. I care about those things. Comics are words and pictures. Graphic design is words and pictures. So it's all the same thing. And so I did a book that was based on the great art by the 8 men that I identified as our Renaissance masters, in the same way current art historians look back 400 years ago on the great Renaissance masters of the human figure, Da Vinci and Raphael and, you know, guys like that, right? But I believe 500 years from now, future art historians are going to look at men like Infantino and Neil Adams and Steranko and Gene Colan and Gil Kane, Jack Kirby.
Right.
I mean, Jack Kirby, he's like a combination of Picasso and Michelangelo. Right. I mean, if you put them together, like that rough, kind of brutal Picasso, Cubist Picasso, and then you take the stone-like figures of Michelangelo,
right?
And you kind of like
meld them.
And that's Jack Kirby. But my point is, my book will hopefully be the book they discover. Like there's that famous book about the Renaissance guys by Vasari, Lives of the Artists, I think it's called. Well, I hope future historians are going to find my book and go, this guy Arlen Schumer had it right.
You got me sold. I'm sold. I want one. And by the way, you reach that where?
I designed it so it looks like a giant comic book. I take out the original word balloon text and I put the artist talking about the artwork that you're looking at.
So it's silverageofcomicbookart.com.
Right. That's my dedicated
right.
site. And
how many things do you do?
Me, I get to sign it for you. I get to bake a sketch in it to make it unique for you. And it's all spelled out, you know, when you go to that site.
Okay, I'm ordering one of those as well. And by the way, let me go to the next while we're here. People don't know, and I'll show them quickly a couple pieces of your artwork. I mean, I'm fascinated by just looking at some of this. I have your site up here to show people. You have another site. I mean, how many sites do you have? It's popcultureman.com.
Well, that's my dedicated merchandise site to sell a limited number of my commercial images as posters or T-shirts. So if you show the graphic that I gave you, or I don't know what, you're just showing the website, but when you go there, you'll see about maybe 50 different images. You know, that's only the top tier. But you can see it's graphic design, it's illustration, it's a little bit of this. Look, there's my marijuana superhero, Dr. Cannabis. I mean, nobody does the range of eclectic stuff I've done. That's the bottom line. As objectively, John, as I could be about my own work.
Yes.
John, are you there?
I'm here. I'm just trying to show everybody.
If you just look at the stuff you're scrolling through, nobody's done the kind of range of stuff I've done in terms of my lectures, my books, my illustration, Twilight Zone works. I mean, my Bruce Springsteen work. I'm too much, man. Too much information.
You're busy. You're a busy guy. You must be a very busy guy.
Getting paid is a whole nother story. If I could monetize my so-called pop culture knowledge, I'd be the richest man on earth.
Well, I'm actually, I was super impressed when I saw the Pop Culture Man site. I was looking at the artwork and I was super, super impressed. It's really, It's a beautiful body of work.
I can count the sales on one hand, okay?
You should be proud of it. It's something to be very proud of.
I'm proud of it, but, you know, I got bills to pay too, you know.
I understand. Well, hopefully we'll get some people buying. I think people here are looking at this saying that's really cool.
Shameless sales plug department. You know, like Mad Magazine would do it. Shameless.
So, you know, I haven't even started your interview yet. We haven't gotten anywhere.
I told you 1 hour is just the tip of the tip of the
iceberg. So let's go into Twilight Zone a little bit real quick. So
we didn't talk about Twilight Zone.
Let's talk about something about the Twilight Zone, because that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And you know something, I probably would I'd love to have done an interview with you on each thing individually.
Well, you should. What's the topic? I ain't going anywhere. I'm available.
Yeah, we'll come back and do the James Bond thing in the future.
You need to do a whole Arlen Schumer multi-part series.
I would do it. So Monsters Due on Maple Street. One of my favorites.
Yes.
Yourself, I'm sure.
Not one of my favorites, but I respect it because it's considered one of Sterling's greatest. It's the most timeliest. You know, in my webinar about the Twilight Zone in the age of Corona that I've done for New York Adventure Club, that's one of the I show clips of about how people, the minute that they lose their creature comforts, like we can identify with in this pandemic
today, yeah,
you know, people will basically Lord of the Flies, you know, Night of the Living Dead, kill each other, eat each other up alive.
Is there any relevance to that?
Looking at the American landscape like David Lynch and peeling the dark underbelly and exposing, you know, people like Stephen King in his book Dance Macabre, 1983 nonfiction overview of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. He has a chapter on the Twilight Zone. And he said episodes like The Monsters Due on Maple Street and The Shelter, which is the sister episode about neighbors that claw each other to death over access to a bomb shelter when they think the bomb is going to drop.
As we all would.
This was Serling. Well, this was Serling living in suburbia, whether it was Westport, which I think led to writing Monsters, or whether it was living in California, which is what led to writing The Shelter. You know, he saw, listen, we are so lucky in this pandemic that we haven't lost electricity.
You're right.
We're penalized to sitting at home in our luxurious home theaters
watching
with our internet and every, you know, convenience known to man being delivered, and people are complaining. Can you imagine? When Hurricane Sandy hit, we weren't that bad in Westport. We lost power for like 3 days.
Right.
No flooding. We escaped. But
not here.
But the 3 days we had no power, only the local Starbucks had power. If I told you wealthy white suburbanites were about to Lord of the Flies each other over access to those outlets to plug in their phones.
I believe you. I believe you. I was down.
During the pandemic, we lost electricity. It would be like the purge every day.
You're right, and they say that if we ever had one of those, what is it?
That's what Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. Since you brought it up,
it's like
that's all about.
And it's amazing the way it starts. The guy's car, his car doesn't start.
Well, their electric appliances. There's basically they lose their electricity, and people basically freak out the moment their appliances don't work.
And the little boy says it's aliens.
How weak we are and unresilient we are as a race. You know, as a race of humanoids, we can't deal with it when we can't use our electric shavers. People are pathetic.
Who's shaving? So that's actually one of my favorites. That's one of my extra favorite. And then everyone's favorite is, of course, tell us what your thoughts are on To Serve Man. I mean, that's...
Again, not one of my favorites either.
Not really? Interesting.
That has emerged in the last 25 years. It used to be Eye of the Beholder was always everybody's favorite, the pig faces.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
And then people would always name Time Enough at Last with Burgess Meredith and the Broken Glasses. To Serve Man has come out of left field.
There it is.
I think it's because in my lectures, I talk about this. There was the 1983 science fiction series V, which was also about benevolent aliens coming, but in reality, they're lizard people.
Yes.
And then that show was remade in 2007 with Morena Baccarin, whatever her name, Morena Baccarin. And I don't know if you saw that. It was on ABC lasted like 2 seasons.
I did watch it, actually, yeah.
I liked it. I don't know. I wish they had kept it going. The point is I think In the same way Vertigo came out of nowhere to be rated by movie critics a couple years ago as greatest movie of all time, it leapfrogged over Citizen Kane, Godfather, and Casablanca out of nowhere. The same things happen with this To Serve Man. I consider To Serve Man, I call it a punchline episode. All the Twilight Zones had great surprise endings, but there are the surprise endings and there are the surprise endings. When the whole episode comes down to a pun on To Serve Man, but people love it. People love it. And it's still very confusing to me. Why would they intentionally leave the book behind? That wasn't an accident. So what was the purpose in that? And then the other thing I don't understand about that episode, logic-wise, is so everybody on Earth, once they're convinced the Canamites are benevolent, everyone on Earth starts traveling to their planet. And nobody's returning. And at one point, one person says, oh, when you get there, it's like you never want to go home. But does that imply that nobody returned because they were all eaten? So how does that make sense? So people on Earth, their relatives and friends of all those people that are leaving on these spaceships, they're never coming back. They don't hear from them again. And everybody's fine with that? Even as a kid, that made no sense to me. Everybody loves that episode. So far, John, we barely talked about anything.
I know. We haven't talked
about. This is more about you, John. Monsters Are Doing Maple. That's not my favorite episode.
Tell us.
All we're talking about is what you want to talk about.
You're right. Let's go your direction. Where would you like to go?
You're the host.
Okay, then I'm going to give it back to you. Just speaking of,
it doesn't mean you have to be selfish and only talk about what you want to talk about. You should be asking me, the guest, Arlen, what is your favorite episode?
Arlen, I'm selfish and dyslexic.
Well,
those are both jokes.
But selfish is different from dyslexic. That's not in the same class.
Well, I'll put them in the same category right now.
It's some old Jewish Old Testament thing. Mm-hmm. If you joke about being sick, you're giving yourself what's called the Kenahara, which is the evil eye. You're basically taking a negative thought and giving it verbal power. Words have power.
Words do have power.
You looked at your dyslexic, which, by the way, plausible, ergo not a joke by the laws of comedy.
Sure. Hey, let me
bringing up Kenahara, and you're John Pizzi. I'm trying to get some Jewish wisdom.
You got my name wrong. That's okay. Hey, let me ask you
this.
Speaking of non-logic.
How do you pronounce your name?
It's Pizzi. Speaking of non-logic. It's fine. It's okay.
Pizzi?
You could be Schumer or Schumer. It's okay. It's all good.
What did I say? Pizzi?
I think he said pizza, yeah.
But
it doesn't matter. Let me ask you this.
To you, it matters. You brought it up.
I got not at all. I'm just breaking your chops.
I'm busting your balls.
I know, but I know you can handle it. You're the guy.
Grass, John.
I love you.
Trying to bust my balls. Good luck.
I love your chutzpah. I love it. I love you too. I love you back. Hey, let me ask you this, because this is interesting. You're talking about the logic with that particular episode, and I started thinking about today about logic. If you remember the one with Burgess Meredith, where at the end the glasses break and
everybody loves that.
One of the greatest. But I kept thinking, wouldn't it have been a better ending if instead of the glasses breaking, that he came out, took his glasses off, and looked up, and he got his eyes burned and went blind? Because when you think about
what?
Burned from after the explosion or whatever.
Don't quit your day job and start writing science fiction.
Bad idea. It's not a good idea.
Here's where I thought you were going with this, because we are still, when I say we, there's a million Facebook sites that try to. We're still debating whether Henry Bemis, the character played by Burgess Meredith, whether he deserved his fate based on the laws of story dynamics.
Okay.
People are either sympathetic to him and feel terrible that he broke his glasses, which is very manipulative from a creator's point of view. And remember, Serling adapted this. This is not Serling's worldview.
Okay.
The author, Lynn Venable, Serling was a master adapter. Some of his greatest episodes are adaptations. And there's a lot to adapt a short story to a half-hour television show. But Serling mastered that art. And therefore, I believe Serling's ending, had this been a Serling story, he would have not broken his glasses, and we would have had the classic pull-away crane shot of him happily getting rewarded, because remember his wife? I could do a whole lecture on marriage in the Twilight Zone. He had that horrible wife. You wonder how they even got married in the first place. That must have been an arranged marriage or something. But the point is she ripped up his book of poetry. His life was hell. No wonder and then he worked at the bank. Can that be any more mind-numbing? So escape from the harsh reality of his life, and we should be judgmental about his. People think he deserved his fate. Oh, well, he was antisocial.
Wow.
50-50 down the middle. We're still debating this.
Amazing.
So alternate ending, Serling's worldview, I don't believe, would have punished him like that. It would have rewarded him, and that would have been just a satisfying ending. But why do we remember that episode? Because it's cruel. It's cruelty, just like the masses loved the Roman Colosseum and people murdering each other. We love Bemis getting horribly punished by being made blind, and we feel he did not deserve his fate. That is manipulative on the part of the author, Lynn Venable. You can't make a sympathetic character with a shrew of a wife. You can't make that character then get punished at the end.
I see.
Story dynamics don't work that way.
You always have a great, interesting, different viewpoint. I really enjoy that. I really do love
cool. Yeah, it's called my viewpoint. It's like
no, but your viewpoint is different and makes you. It's thoughtful.
But of course, isn't everyone's viewpoint theoretically? It should be unique to who they are.
No,
well, that's because people are idiots. They're sheep.
People are idiots. People are parrots of other people's information, generally speaking.
Don't get me started. Don't put me down, man.
Arlen, how about The Invaders with Agnes Moorehead? That was written by Matt.
Again, it's not in my top. Maybe it's in my top 25.
Well, let's get to
my top 10. But is it a brilliant, creative, great Richard Matheson episode? Did he hate the little Michelin men, and that's why he rewrote the episode a dozen years later as the Karen Black episode called Amelia on ABC with a little Zuni hunting fetish doll?
Yeah, it was bizarre. It was great.
Do you know Matheson wrote that because
no, I did not.
Always pissed off at how ridiculous the little Michelin men looked?
He didn't like it. Yeah, they had no budget.
He hated the gremlin on the wing in his William Shatner episode.
Really?
Nightmare 20,000 Feet. Hated it.
Budget issues. Well, you want to
know the vinyl padding on the gremlin's soles of his feet.
I will tell you my favorite episode, and I'll tell you why. And I watched it over and over and over again, and it intrigues me every time to this exact day. The Howling Man. And the reason being, and I'm not really exactly 100% sure.
It's one of the loved episodes, Twilight Zone, one of Charles Beaumont's most loved episodes. Once again, didn't even make my top 25.
Get out of here. All right. Well, you have to respect the craft of when he turns from the human being.
Say I didn't respect it.
Yes. I didn't say you didn't.
Things I don't like.
I'm saying you have to respect the fact that
I respect the fact that people love it so much, but it's not even in my top 25 favorite episodes.
Well, let's go to your top. Well, let me make one point about the Howling Man. I love the way he turned from the human being into the evil devil as he walked by.
Because that was the special effects of the day. You look at it now, and the cutting is horrible. It's really jagged. Oh, come on, get over it. Grow up. Everybody? I love when he turns to the devil. I mean, the Twilight Zone wasn't even about special effects. The greatest episodes are in your mind, in walking distance. When Gig Young goes back in time, he literally just walks back in time, and the great director Robert Stevens shoots the scene in the mirror of a gas station so that we see him like Alice in Wonderland. It's intellectual, it's witty, it's creative, it's graphic, but it's not a special effect. Whenever the Twilight Zone did quote monsters like Outer Limits, they were horrible.
Yeah.
Like the Michelin Men and the Gremlin on the Wing.
Yeah.
Twilight Zone's greatest episodes, in my opinion, it's the dimension of imagination. It occurs up here.
When you're thinking
psychological fear, anything psychological is where it's at, man. And the greatest episodes, like the one called World of Difference, where a guy's in his office and his phone is dead, and he goes out to tell his secretary, and he hears somebody else cut. and he turns to his left, and there's a whole movie crew filming his life.
Which is, by the way, almost the same movie today, which was remade. Well, not today. It was made several years ago with
show in 1990.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Lecture about.
Which, by the way, people write simulation theory shows about.
So again, this is where you get the 6 degrees of Serling, as I call it.
Yes.
These episodes were based on stories and ideas from the science fiction field of the early and mid 20th century, but it was in a cloistered, cultish field of people who read science fiction pulp novels. Serling took some of the greatest works and brought them to this new medium called American television. And by translating them to these 2-act plays filmed for television, he created a new art form. And that art form was these Twilight Zone episodes.
Absolutely.
So it's not like he invented parallel worlds or robots or mannequins or anything that the Great Twilight Zone is about, but he put them on television. And that, the context changed. The medium is the message. In Serling's opening advertising copy for the first episode, it says, its tales cannot be told, they must be shown. You can deconstruct that ad copy as saying, this ain't radio. This is television. You've got to watch these episodes. This isn't about, because Serling wrote for radio. He went from radio to television. So it's right there in the opening advertising description of the Twilight Zone. So my episodes, like that one I just described, is about deep philosophical ideas about, is life predestined? Are we living out a script, or are we making it up as we go along? Do we live in a benevolent universe or a malevolent universe? And that's in 25 minutes. Serling and Company, Richard Matheson wrote that episode, took these complex philosophical ideas that mankind has been debating as long as mankind's been around, and put them in 25-minute episodes on television.
Then one of your favorites has to be the 79th episode, All Trapped and Not Knowing Who They Are, because that is a mind game. That was a mind game from the beginning to the end.
What's it called?
All Trapped and Not Knowing Who They Are, the ballerina, the hobo.
It's called 5 Characters in Search of an Exit.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, that is the episode I show newbies, young people that have never really seen the Twilight Zone. Yeah, I show them that episode first. Why? Because we're all characters trapped in a conundrum of our own making that we have to climb out of. We are 5 billion characters in search of an exit on Spaceship Earth. And in this 25-minute episode, these characters, these 5 characters that represent sort of like human nature.
I have a picture of them here. Boom.
Well, that's not from the episode. That's a piece of internet art.
Is it really? I'm sorry. Yeah. There you go. There you go. That's from the episode.
Yeah. And you could just see in the body language of the ballerina that this episode is directed like a kind of a stage play. I mean, the Twilight Zone episodes were 2-act plays filmed for television, and the compositions, and I bet you Cesar Romero got his Joker personality from the clown in that episode. But it's about, they keep saying, where are we? What are we? Who are we? Those are the 3 questions man has been asking since time immemorial. Where are we? What are we, and who are we?
Yeah, and it was
really here.
It was squeezed into this. It was beautiful.
25 minutes. So that is the greatness of Serling and the Twilight Zone, is that in a brief amount of time, that's why you could teach storytelling to young movie directors, young artists of any type, because the terse storytelling in these greatest episodes in 25 minutes to get across that much plot with that much social and philosophical meaning is an art form. And the Twilight Zone episodes at their best are primers on how to get in, tell a story, and get out.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Every great episode was edutainment. It was both education, meaning you learned something about the human condition, but you were also entertained. That's the highest goal of all.
It's win, 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 win. Hey, and the side they're asking us, may we hear at least the top 10 of your favorites then? please.
Okay, so in no particular order, but I'll try to go chronological.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. The very first episode, Where Is Everybody? Time Enough at, not Time Enough at Last. You know, that's not even in my, I don't think, top 25. Even though I acknowledge it, I lecture about it. But Walking Distance. Those are the only 2 episodes, by the way. Where Is Everybody in Walking Distance? Directed by this guy, Robert Stevens. And yet those 2 episodes might be 2 of the greatest Twilight Zone episodes, because the pilot, Where Is Everybody? About a man totally alone in the world. That's the essential alienation of modern man. You can't be more alienated from the world than to be the only person alive in it. And that is the Twilight Zone's first episode. So what is the job of a pilot episode? It's to lay out the theme of what the show is going to be about. You could find your favorite episode in that episode. Somewhere in that episode is a little bit of your favorite episode. Doesn't matter what it is. So, and then he comes back 5 episodes later and directs Walking Distance, which is the greatest time travel story of the 20th century in any medium. In any medium, the greatest time travel story is Walking Distance. And particularly the second half at the commercial break.
Yes.
To the end, I call the Citizen Kane of television.
Why is that? That for people that know, this is the one where the man needs to escape the pressure of his work and
goes back in time
years into
childhood and meets himself as a kid. He meets his parents.
Yes.
It was Sterling's wish fulfillment. He wanted to go back in time because he was in Europe in World War II when his father died of a stroke. They didn't even let him go home for the funeral.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
This is all part of his biography that you could get in that novel by, pardon me, plug.
Okay.
But
Walking Distance. Okay.
yeah, so Walking Distance. Then you have, oh man, there's so many great, but Mirror in the first season alone. If the Twilight Zone only had 1 season and then ended, it would still be in the Hall of Fame because there's like 18 half hours that are like in the top 18. I mean, there's and when the sky was opened, about the 3 astronauts that each one disappeared during the episode. If that isn't pre-psychedelic trippiness by Rod Serling, I don't know what is. Okay. Actually, Serling adapting a Matheson short story. So again, when you discover what he changed, that's the art of adaptation. And he took one of Matheson's, okay stories and made a little mini masterpiece, if you know the episode I'm talking about. Then there's World of Difference that I just described about the man hearing somebody yell cut. There's the After Hours about the woman, Anne Francis, becoming a mannequin. Brilliant.
Loved it.
Eye of the Beholder from the second season. Fantastic. Shadow Play, which is one of the greatest episodes by Charles Beaumont about the nature of dreams and reality, about the guy who thinks he's getting electrocuted as a recurring dream and everybody thinks he's nuts. Everything from Mulholland Drive by David Lynch to Vanilla Sky by Cameron Crowe. I mean, this episode has so influenced Inception. This idea of reality within reality is done by Charles Beaumont in 25 minutes, called Shadow Play.
I don't think people wouldn't think of this unless you bring it up and like you are.
Never talk to me.
Yeah, people don't think about this.
They got to discover me. You think I'm making this?
I mean, you're an expert at this stuff. Continue, please.
Nobody's patted me on the head and made me an expert, by the way. Yeah. I'm still waiting for my non-existent father to pat me on the head. Good job, Arlen.
I'm patting you on the head. I think you're brilliant. So please continue. You gave me a few. Let me hear the rest.
Oh, have I not named 10 episodes? Like I said,
yeah, you already did. 10.
I'm barely. Okay, so season 2 has the obsolete man.
Yeah.
Also with Burgess Meredith, you are obsolete.
Condemned for death for obsolescence.
For that episode.
Yeah.
Is like that should have got an Emmy just for that.
Romney Wadsworth, am I right?
Romney Wordsworth, a man of words.
Yes.
Words.
Condemned to death for obsolescence.
Being a librarian, a man of words, Mr. Wordsworth. Yeah, hey, Rod, a little nail on the head, a little too much on the nose. He names the librarian Wordsworth. You like that?
Yeah, very, very fun.
Yeah, you see, that's what happens when you're your own boss and nobody's editing you. It's like I would have said, "Hey, Rod, like, where was Buck Houghton, the producer?" You should have said, "Rod, I dig the episode, man, but Wordsworth, are you kidding me?"
Hey, what about the encounter with George Takei or Takei?
Please.
It was banned, right? It was banned.
Well, let me finish with my greatest episodes.
Sure.
So then in the third season, you've got the great 5 characters in search of an exit. You got a lot of, remember I said there's 50 episodes that are good to great?
Yes.
Season 3 has a lot of those episodes, like The Jungle I love, where the guy has to walk through Central Park at night.
Yeah.
Hearing animal jungle sounds, and then he gets home and there's a lion in his bedroom. I mean, you talk about surrealism. Magritte had paintings of lions in domestic settings, and the Twilight Zone has the great image of a lion in a suburban early 60s bedroom. Perfect.
I wasn't crazy about that particular one compared to the others. In my opinion,
only so much I can do. Only so much I can do to turn you on to the good shit.
I will watch it again. I will watch it again with another option.
That is such a classic episode. Are you like, what planet are you on?
I don't know. The planet I'm on is I don't know.
That never really grabbed me. It's a planet
me.
I'm trying to get you to leave and come to my planet, where The Jungle is one of the great episodes.
Please, I don't want to interrupt you. Continue.
Okay, so then in season 4, the hour-longs, I think 16 of them are unwatchable. They're padded. I feel that way about all of Outer Limits, too. I mean, even the 1 hours of Alfred Hitchcock. The 1 hour format doesn't seem to work for this fantasy format. Even Black Mirror goes on too long. They could all be edited down. It seems like today's creators are afraid of the half-hour format. Mm-hmm. Although there's great drama being done on television half hours, like Better Things by Pamela Adlon. Those are like comedy dramas, but there's a lot of drama, and she says a lot in a half hour. So I don't know why all people are so afraid. Everyone in Jordan Peele's new Twilight Zones is over a half hour. They're all too long and padded. But 2 of the episodes from Twilight Zone's 1 hour season make my list.
Okay.
On Thursday, we leave for home. James Whitmore as the leader of the colony on a deserted planet.
Yeah, great one. Yep.
And then at the end, he thinks he's God, basically, and stays home on the planet alone while they fly away because of his delusions of
grandeur.
Yeah. I mean, again, where else do you see? Like Stephen King said in his book, it's like Serling exposed this dark part of human nature that we had never seen on television. And it was episodes like that. And then there was Richard Matheson's episode Death Ship about the 3 crew members that crash land on a planet in their escapades. And they discover an exact duplicate of their crash ship, except the exact duplicates of themselves are lying dead. So that gets to the existential horror of what the Twilight Zone is. Confronting your own dead body would be a pretty trippy, mind-altering experience, don't you think?
That was Walter Matthau in there too, wasn't it?
No, Jack Klugman. You're thinking.
Klugman. Sorry, thank you.
The Odd Couple. Well done.
Getting close.
I'll give you points for that.
Okay.
Or is that one of your jokes?
No, it's not a joke. That's just confusion. Same thing.
Okay, so then we get to season 4, the last season. There's a couple of great episodes. Number 12, Looks Just Like You, about the woman getting body transformation to become beautiful.
Great. And by the way, the way that was directed by not seeing any of the doctors, it doesn't.
No, that's Eye of the Beholder. You're mistaken.
Oh, Eye of the Beholder. I'm sorry. You're right.
I got to come over and do a little rewiring in your head.
I'm going to get you a table book.
I got to do like a little soldering.
Get online, Arlen.
I got to open you up and tweak a few wires.
Way online.
Yeah, I got to do something with you. But no, they're sister episodes because that's why you got them mixed up. They're both about transformations. One was just facial plastic surgery. The other was the whole body.
Yes.
One was a Serling original. The other was an adaptation from a short story.
I see.
Classic Twilight Zone. But they're sister episodes in terms of theme. But there are just some incredible lines of dialogue in number 12 Looks Just Like You that are just unbelievable. Like, Gee, why can't I think of it right now? Because without without ugliness, there can be no beauty. You know, these men wrote about life and about the dignity of the human spirit and about love. I mean, I can recite these things, but
wow, you got the menu.
yeah, I mean, and then season 5 has Living Doll with Talkie Tina. You know, by the way, season 3, I forgot, has the greatest ventriloquist dummy episode of anybody, and that's The Dummy with Cliff Robertson. Now, ventriloquism. You know how many movies and other shows have done the ventriloquist doll coming to life?
Magic, yeah.
Okay, guess what? The Serling, again, another masterful adaptation from a short story. But The Dummy on the Twilight Zone with Cliff Robertson, I maintain, is the greatest ventriloquist dummy come to life by anybody, anytime, anywhere.
That one with Cliff Robertson. Now, how many ventriloquists were there in a series? Wasn't there 2 or 3?
There was The Great Gabbo, a silent movie from the 20s.
Yes.
There was the 1945 British film Dead of Night, in which one of the 4 stories was about a ventriloquist dummy. Then Hitchcock did an episode called The Glass Eye with William Shatner, believe it or not.
God, you got them all.
Okay, yeah, and then there's The Dummy. Sorry, and then after The Dummy was, Magic.
Magic in 1973. Yeah.
The Chucky movies, basically The Dummy, with Living Doll. The point is Twilight Zone did it best.
I agree. I can watch it over and over again.
And I can still remember, Willie, how can you be real when you're made of wood? You made me real. Put words in my mouth.
Wow.
You made me talk. Are you satisfied from the song of the same name?
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. You got the voice and all.
Only Serling could write dialogue like that.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
You jerk. I love it. He calls him a jerk. You jerk. You made me real. You put words in my mouth. You stuck out my tongue. You jerk. Oh, I know what he says. He goes, you jerk. You made me what I am today. Are you satisfied from the song of the same name?
You got the same voice. The voice is like,
because I've been watching that episode my whole life over and over.
Oh, my God. That's creepy. That's creepy. Wow, that's great. So now let me ask you, in the Twilight Zone, am I right? There were 3 episodes with ventriloquisms in them, because there was that one, and then
the others suck.
Well, I did like the one where he's telling the little kid.
The one with Jackie Cooper is horrible from season 5. Horrible.
And the other?
I think that's it. There isn't a third on the Twilight Zone with a talking dummy. Again, people conflate other shows like One Step Beyond and Alfred. They come up to me at the end of my lectures, Arlen, I've always loved this episode. It was about blah, 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 blah. And I wait till they're done and I go, that wasn't a Twilight Zone episode. It wasn't? Usual response.
It's amazing, though, how informative you are and how much you can remember about all this stuff. And you can even do the voices of certain characters. It's amazing.
My brain.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, listen, can we do this again? And we'll break
down, man.
Okay. I would like to break down the bond that you
I would love to, man. Anytime you want me on, John.
Well, let's see. This is going to be James Bond. Here it is, right there.
Night. This Wednesday, 8 p.m.
July 29th. It's coming up real quick.
2 hours. Strap yourself in. It's like a live documentary in real time.
I'm going to
guarantee to blow your mind anytime. Who sang that?
Yeah, there you go. And I would definitely, I'm signing up myself, and I want you guys out there to please sign up for this, and then we can talk about it later on after.
Now, look, you left off the T. You see it says he, Sean Connery. You left off the T of the.
Did I really?
Yeah.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You're very detailed. I appreciate that.
That's because I'm an artist.
I said Sean Connery.
Sean Connery. Bond cannon.
You could also
the Bond cannon.
Listen, when I come to Westport, I go by you. I go to Hartford. I go to Massachusetts. I'm stopping by. We're going to have lunch.
On me.
No, it's on me. And there's no place to go. It'll be on your back because it's
people are sitting outside now. I see.
Are they in Connecticut? Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess I've been foraging everything and eating at home.
All right. Well, I have a guy that just asked me to come up and perform at a camp in overnight camp somewhere in Massachusetts. So on the way up, on the way down, I'm going.
Camp this summer in the summer of COVID.
Yeah, yeah.
How are they doing that?
With social distancing.
How are they social distancing kids?
I don't know the rules in Massachusetts. I'm just telling you that's what they have.
I'm going to go up and die over giving a lecture.
Listen, I'm not going to come give you a hug. I'm just going to come eat lunch. I'm not going 6 feet apart from you. We'll be fine.
I just say it. I was in summer camp when I was a kid. How can you social distance in summer camp?
I don't know. We'll all be dead.
What about being together, sitting around the campfire?
we'll all be dead soon anyway. What's the difference? It'll be like a good Twilight Zone.
You're up, John. You cynic.
No, it'll happen. So we could get Arlen. We could see you here. Here we go. Silver.
That's to buy my book. But go to arlenschumer.com, which is my website, which has all my stuff on it. Yeah, when you go to there, you'll see my Bruce stuff, my Twilight Zone, my comic book stuff, my illustration. Everything's linked. You can go to my YouTube channel. My blog has all of my current events and
Facebook too.
Everything, and then Facebook friend me. I run 3 comics history groups on Facebook.
All of these things. Even Sean Connery. Sean Connery.
Sean Connery. Sean Cannon.
You're hilarious. I love you. You're a good sport, and thanks for letting me break your chops a little bit too. You're a good sport.
Listen, I busted your balls right back.
I love it.
Time, any guest of yours has busted your balls like I busted your balls.
Never have. And you know something? I love it. We're gonna
nobody ever will. So if you really want to have me on, be prepared to have your balls busted.
I'm ready. Anytime, brother.
Remember, my balls are dipped in brass. You can't bust them. They're unbustable. You can try.
I believe you. I really do.
Hear me now and believe me later.
You're better with the dummy thing. Sorry, folks, please go see arlenschumer.com, and we're going to have him back to talk about after the...
Can I end with one thing?
Yes, please.
Since I'm moved by the spirit.
Okay.
We really didn't talk about Bruce much.
No.
Let me just mention, since everybody does a Rod Serling impression.
Okay.
Right? He's been the most, imitated.
Sure.
And I do a pretty good Rod Serling, But has anybody done Rod Serling doing Bruce Springsteen? Are you ready?
No.
Are you ready? So make believe I got my suit and tie on.
I'm ready.
With a thin black tie. And I got the smoking cigarette. And I turn around and I look you in the eye and I go, in the day we sweated out on the streets of a runaway American dream. At night, we ride through mansions of glory and suicide machines. Baby, this town rips the bones from your back to death. We've got to get out while we're young because tramps like us, baby, we were born to run into the Twilight Zone.
Beautifully well. How could I end better than that? It's a beautiful.
I said I'll give you a great ending.
I love it. Arlen,
I give you a happy ending.
Well, I'm done.
Mission accomplished, as the previous president ever once said.
Thank you so much. You're definitely a treat.
I love you, John. Anytime.
It was too much fun.
Arlen
Schumer.
I'll see you Wednesday night at Bond.
It's going to happen.
Chat board on the side of the webinar. It's a lively chat board.
Wednesday night. Come please see Arlen.
I'll change.
It'll be really good. Go to right here for that, and right over here for that. There you go. Thank you, Arlen. Stay well. Speak to you soon. Bye. Okay. That was so much fun. I have to tell you, I didn't get to even talk about half of the things I wanted to because Arlen has really got it all compressed, and it's amazing to me. And I'd like to end this off on a really good note. Please go to arlenschumer.com and check out his new webinar coming up next week. That would be interesting to see. But I wanted to end this off with the quote from Serling, which I thought was super interesting that I read. And I think I want to keep this in mind for future reference. And Serling said, I happen to think that the singular evil of our time is prejudice. And it is this evil that all our other evils grow and multiply. In almost everything I've written, there is a thread of this. Man's seemingly palpable need to dislike someone other than himself. Oh, boy, I can't even speak. I'm burnt. But, this is really true. The evil is prejudice, and prejudice means to prejudge others. And by doing that, we gyp ourselves. That's coming from me. Hey, this was a lot of fun. I hope you guys, I'm going to have Arlen back as soon as I can. And go check him out, arlenschumer.com. I want to thank my booker, John Galasso, right there, justlaugh.org. And we don't claim any ownership of this media as well. All right, guys, have a great one. Take care. See you next week.